Final Fantasy. The name alone evokes a sense of wonder and magic. So many good games have come from the series, and I'm sure you yourself have one that you remember fondly. But out of all of them, everyone has one that's their favorite. And many people's favorite is 7, for a lot of reasons. The graphics, the story, and the fact that it basically revitalized the RPG genre in America. Final Fantasy VII is a huge landmark in gaming, one that many people will never forget.
Man, shut up, Grenade Man Blitz. You've never even played Final Fantasy VII.
I may have never played it all the way through, but I've played Crisis Core, Dirge of Cerberus, I've watched Advent Children, and after all these years and extensive research, even before making this video just for my own curiosity, I know the whole story. I do mean to get around to playing it, but I just haven't yet. Are you still with me? Cool. Thanks for sticking around. So why are you here? Well, I'm sure it's because you're either excited or wary about the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm pretty excited for it, but I do feel there are a few things worth talking about. As with all of these personal perspectives videos, these are my opinions, and I'll do my best to support them. If you've got your own thoughts on the matter, share them in the comments below. I think the main thing to remember here that this is not remastered Final Fantasy VII. This is Final Fantasy VII Remake, and that's very important to consider. The verbiage of remaster is usually akin to prettying up the sound, the visuals, things of that nature, but we're getting a full-fledged remake, and that can scare a few people. With this being a remake, you can bet that Square Enix is going to take some liberties on the execution of how the game comes out. One of the things I'm most worried about is censorship. As any fan of the game will tell you, there are a few scenes in the game that if it was made now, probably wouldn't fly thanks to the way that gaming culture has changed. But this may be attributed to the fact that this is not Squaresoft we're dealing with, it's Square Enix. I think the best way to represent that difference is with the Musashi games.
From the land of the rising sun.
Hey, stop! Moose Slashy, props to you, dude!
With Squaresoft, we were given a game that knew what it wanted to be. An adventure game, with simple but effective gameplay, decent voice acting, a genuinely fun world, and a beautiful classic anime art style. With Samurai Legend, the whole game feels manufactured, as if it were being created just to sell money for the fans, while trying something new. Well, I can't fault them for trying something new, unlike another company I know! But still, the acquisition of Enix really did change the company. What I'm worried most about in this game is the idea of censorship and changing of certain scenes. The cross-dressing scene is such a memorable part of the game that juxtaposes Cloud's nature as a character nowadays so well, it'd be a crime if they didn't keep it in the game, if not for purely comedic value. There are many moments like this in Final Fantasy VII that I fear being cut to give it a more, quote, mature look. The problem here is that you don't need your game to be serious and brooding all the time for it to be mature. The fact of the matter is that when you're writing a story like this, something that's supposed to hit a lot of emotional triggers, you have to keep it realistic. And I don't mean realistic in terms of realism, but in terms of how life works. Not everything is gonna suck all the time. Humor is a part of life, and humorous moments happen to everyone, whether or not they know it. So if they choose to remove certain outlandish moments, then it'll only detract from the storytelling of the game. Things like Barrett's outlandish language have a possibility of being toned down or cut, which I certainly hope they aren't. So maybe if they go this route, they're trying to make the game accessible to all ages. I certainly hope they don't lose the artistic integrity of the game by doing this. And if they do, I'm pretty sure it's Enix to blame. Fun fact, did you know that in the company merger, Enix was actually the one who acquired Squaresoft and absorbed their company? They're actually the survivor. Kinda helps you understand what happened to the quality of their games. Final Fantasy XIII! Let's break up this kinda somber section with something that I'm kinda happy with the remake. I'd like to ask you a question. How do you take a character that's already badass, and don't change anything about him, and make him even more badass? Give him sunglasses! I understand there's just a little tiny detail that doesn't really add or detract anything at all from the game, but I think he looks fucking awesome. But enough of this. One of the main draws of Final Fantasy VII was the active battle system. For those of you who aren't aware, most RPGs work like this. Fastest character moves first, slowest character goes last, in sequential order. Nothing wrong with that, but Square took it a step further and made it so that every character has a speed gauge. What this gauge equated to was a recharge bar that, when filled, allowed the character to go. If you knew your enemy, you could plan your strikes in accordance with theirs. It offers numerous advantages in combat, and was genius on Square's part. But let's take a look at Remake's combat. It's fucking Kingdom Core! I mean, Crisis Hearts! Actually, both of those sound like pretty cool games. But anyway, this is the system that Square has chosen for the game. And in my opinions, it looks great! It feels like the natural progression of the active battle system, a setup that allows you to calculate your opponent's moves and react accordingly. Diehards of the series may be upset that the turn-based system is gone, but let's remember that this is a remake. Personally, I'm excited to play this. It seems to be trying to mimic the combat style of Advent Children. Plus, there's a chance for Square to show off how much the series has evolved in the last years, and I think that's great. Maybe down the road they'll offer a DLC pack to make the game turn-based.
What a fantastic segue, Grenade Man Blitz. Let's talk about the possibility of DLC.
Being a game in this modern era allows a wonderfully flawed system called DLC, which I don't need to explain because you're probably old enough to know how to download things in games. I say flawed because over the years, certain developers of games have allowed their games to come out and feel like they're missing a part of it, only to have DLC packs added later for more content. This is not the right way to do DLC, but that's another video for another day. The right way to do DLC is to make it superfluous for the game, an extra bit of content that, without it, doesn't really detract from the game. What's a good way to handle DLC, you might ask? Well, that's a bit of a hard conversation to have because, honestly, it's really opinionated, and you'd also have to consider the motives behind making it and what it adds to the game. I can show you some bad DLC. Again, opinions. So what does this have to do with Final Fantasy VII's remake? Well, this is the market we live in now. Unfortunately, I can almost guarantee you this game's gonna have DLC. Will it be good? I suppose they could add extra missions that delve into some of the unexplored parts of the story, which wouldn't be so bad. But my fear is this. Yuffie and Vincent aren't characters that you have to find in the game. This might be a bit of a stretch, but what if they turn their parts of the story into some sort of DLC add-on? Not to mention the weapons. Emerald and Ruby Weapon are both optional bosses, so what if they turned them into some sort of DLC mission? Now, maybe if they added Sapphire Weapon as a DLC boss, that'd be something to pay for. Or maybe a version of the game where you save Aerith, and it changes the story of the mainline game. I don't know if that could work, but it'd be interesting. And it's a bit of a long shot, and most likely won't happen. But it still worries me. Things of that nature could really kill the experience that is Final Fantasy VII. Building on that, this game is confirmed to be coming in multiple parts. Now here's where a lot of fans' worry can really stem from. The company claims that this is to make sure they're able to get everything in the game, as not all of the game in its current state can fit onto one disc. Well sure, that's fine and dandy, but didn't you do that with the first game? You know, the 3 discs, and the PlayStation, and all that? Here's what I see happening. Game 1 comes out, then Game 2, then Game 3, not too far apart from each other. Then a few months after Game 3 comes out, they release a special Collector's Game of the Year package edition with all 3 games in one box, for the low cost of $60. Their intent sounds good and fair, but much like the original intent of the first 2 versions of Pokemon, there is a bit of a stench of corporate greed behind it. Am I still gonna get the game? Fuck yeah, I am. The situation again reminds me a lot of .hack. Multiple games with their own stories connecting to a larger overarching story across multiple games meant to be played together. If this was a brand new series and maybe not Final Fantasy VII, it might well be accepted. But I feel like because it is Final Fantasy VII's remake, people are going to be very upset. Let's remember here that the reason they're doing this, or at least what they've told us, is that so they don't have to cut anything, and possibly release it sooner rather than later, which is fine by me. A more complete remastering of Final Fantasy VII versus a bastardized, chopped up smaller version? Yeah, I'd rather have the full package. I've said this to years to my friends. The Final Fantasy VII Remake is Square's ace in the hole. When they need to bounce back, this will be their game to do so. While they were not in the worst financial state when the game was announced, their stock had severely plummeted a month or so after the announcement of Final Fantasy XIV, and in the middle of 2013, their stock was at an all-time low. I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that around the time they began development of Final Fantasy VII was the middle of 2013. They knew if they were to create this game, it would get their company back on track. What's interesting to note is that their stock did in fact spike on the day of the announcement, and has been steadily climbing back up ever since, with a few drops here or there. Square may end up milking this game for all it's worth. It's a business, so this can be expected, but we'll probably get a damn good game out of it. The Final Fantasy VII Remake is shaping up to be one hell of a game. These are a few pieces of news I've come across while researching the game that were holding any ground to me. I have a pretty good feeling about this game, and I sincerely hope that it's not the travesty that Final Fantasy XIII was. Square is pulling out all the stops with this game, and it sounds like it's a project that, while maybe a good investment to them, is a labor of love for the fans of the series. The possibility of censorship may be there, but if Square decides to stand their ground and remember that all the quirkiness of the original game added such a sense of depth and value that it would be a crime to remove it, and they decide to keep it in, we're going to have an amazing game. I'm hopeful. Well, cautiously optimistic, if you will. I'm sure you've got your own thoughts and opinions, and I'd love for you to share them with me in the comments below. So thanks for watching. This has been another Personal Perspectives on Gaming. Hey there, thanks so much for watching! If you liked what you saw here and enjoyed some possibly thought-provoking content, then please consider subscribing. It really helps me and my channel grow. If you like this video, show it with a like maybe. Want to have a civil discussion about it with your friends? Then consider sharing it with them, or at least showing them. You want to hear my thoughts on Elite Beat Agents? Then click right here. What about how I'm none too happy with the Mega Man Legacy Collection? Oh, excuse me, I burped. Then click here. I'll see you in the next video. And remember, video games are the best video games. Later.